Thank you very much. So this gentleman certainly needs no introduction. My name is Mark Bezos, and you're all welcome to call me what my friends do. They usually just refer to me as Jeff's brother. So,
by the way, just so you know, it actually does go both ways. My brother has a TED Talk about small acts of kindness, being a volunteer firefighter, and it has millions of views. And every once in a while, somebody will stop me and say, "I love your TED Talk about being a firefighter and small acts of kindness." And I usually, say, "Well, thank you, but that's really my brother, his TED Talk." But if I'm in a hurry, I just say thank you. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. But if any of you do get confused, I'm the one with the smaller bank account to your left.
He's the big brother.
So, Jeff, before we get started, I think this is obviously a crowd of influential people who are starting out. I think we might as well just make the most of their time. I'm just going to dive right into this, if you don't mind.
Let's go.
So, you are captain of industry, Amazon.com, private spaceflight with Blue Origin, the Washington Post, levels of fame and wealth that are hard to comprehend. I guess one question that probably is at the top of everyone's mind is, if you had to choose one thing, what would you say is your favorite part of having me as a little brother? Because I've taken the liberty of writing down some thoughts.
I know the answer to this. And there are many things I love about having Mark as a brother, but what he just did is number one at the top of the list. When I am with my brother, I just laugh continuously because he is the funniest guy in my life.
Well, thank you. You're an easy audience, and I appreciate it.
I am actually an easy audience. That is true.
He is.
I am.
All right, so here's what we're going to do, if all of you don't mind. So the fact that, a fireside chat among brothers, this is not unique for us. This is something that we do quite often. It's rare that we have, a couple thousand of our closest friends with us.
Yeah.
And it's also
rare
that
we don't do it in front of an audience, and we usually actually have a fire.
Yes, and bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we don't have now. But
no.
So... what we're going to talk about, the things that I'm going to chat with Jeff about, are not the sorts of things perhaps that you would hear in most interviews, because I don't, two pizza rules is not really my jam. So we're not going to talk about those things. But we do have a shared history. So what I really want to focus on is the influences and the inspirations that have led to some of the things, the foundation of what.
This is a little intimidating. He knows way too much. It's.
So, and what I'd like to do is invite all of you to join in on what is some of our greatest hits, I guess, from my point of view. And because we have such a shared history, what I've done, much to Jeff's chagrin, is I've gone through and taken the liberty of pulling together a bunch of family photos. So I'm going to be throwing some of those up behind us, and just so that you guys can, sort of understand. So if we start talking shorthand, you'll understand what it is that we're referring to. So, all sound good? All right. So I am going to, and I appreciate your patience. This is not the sort of thing that I usually do, so I appreciate your patience. So we're just going to dive right into it. So when we were kids, we would spend every summer on our grandfather's ranch in South Texas. We called our grandfather Pop.
That's Pop.
There's Pop right there.
We were probably just fixing that windmill.
Yes, always fixing windmills.
Yeah.
Before you were climbing them and smashing bottles upon them, which you did recently in an Instagram video. So, one of the things that we would do, every summer, it was really a magical experience. There's little Jeff.
Yeah. That was my maximum cuteness right there. So, by the way, all downhill from there. That's a 1962 International Harvester Scout. We all learned to drive in that car.
That car.
Once you can drive that car, you can drive anything.
And then this is, so there's the two of us. That is Jeff teaching me how to open or close a gate, which doesn't seem like it would be that complicated, but I was having trouble with it.
Wire gap gates are tough.
And then this is...
that's Red. Well, that's Christina, our sister.
That's our sister Christina.
But the horse
is Red.
That's Red. That's... Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that we learned
There's
every
Pop,
summer.
yeah.
This is Pop again. So there was, as we alluded to with the windmills, there was always work to be done on the ranch. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think we learned to value, and you've spoken about this in the past, is the role that resourcefulness, self-reliance
Yeah, for
plays.
sure.
Certainly in a place
everything.
like the ranch. But
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about?
Well, so one of the great things that you learn, and first of all, we had a very fortunate, lucky childhood. We got to spend a lot of time with Pop and our grandparents, and you learn different things from grandparents than you learn from parents. It's just a very different relationship. I spent all my summers on his ranch from age 4 to 16, and he was incredibly self-reliant. If you're in the middle of nowhere, in a rural area, you don't pick up the phone and call somebody when something breaks. You figure out how to fix it yourself. And so, as a kid, I got to see him solve all these problems and be a real problem solver. He even did his own veterinary work. He would make his own needles to suture up the cattle with. He would take a piece of wire, use a blowtorch to heat it up, pound it flat, sharpen it, drill a hole through it, make a needle. And some of the cattle even survived. And so, we learned a lot of things from watching him because he would take on major projects that he didn't really know how to do, and then figure out how to do them.
A good example of that is you guys built a house.
Yeah.
But I think he bought this out of a Sears catalog.
It was a kit house, and we built that thing. Somebody came out. It all showed up in big boxes, and a professional came out and poured the foundation, and then we did the rest of it. But
I'm pretty sure
that was quite a project.
In going
there's
through
you can see some of the cows there that didn't survive the procedure.
So, when I was going through these, it certainly I came across this photo, which
oh God, yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what it was you were doing here, but I'm almost positive
it looks
you're
like
doing
that,
it wrong.
Maybe that vent really pissed me off. I don't know. That's certainly.
Well, I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, OSHA would not be pleased with the way you're on that ladder, and it appears as though you're crafting a spear.
I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah.
So, I think that if you can talk a little bit. I know that there's this bulldozer in the background.
Yeah. That's a
is the funny part
D6
of.
Caterpillar bulldozer that my grandfather bought used for $5,000, which is an enormous bargain. This thing, it should cost way more than that. The reason it was so cheap is it was completely broken. The transmission was stripped, the hydraulics didn't work. And so we spent basically a whole summer repairing it, and big giant gears would arrive by mail order from Caterpillar, and we couldn't even move the gears. So the first thing my grandfather did was build a crane to move the gears. So that's that kind of, self-reliance and resourcefulness.
And there's also there's a story that is somewhat legendary in our family. One of the things that Pop did one summer, it was a little out of character.
Oh, I know what story you're talking about. So he really actually was a very careful, conservative sort of person, not prone to crazy acts or anything. He was kind of introspective and very even introverted, quiet person. But one day, he was all by himself. He had driven to the ranch, and he was at the main gate to the ranch, and he forgot to put the car in park. And so when he got to the gate, he noticed that the car was slowly rolling downhill toward the gate. He thought, this is fantastic. I have just enough time to unlatch the gate, throw the gate open. The car is going to drive right through, and those will be wonderful. He almost got the gate unlatched when the car hit the gate, and it caught his thumb between the gate and the fence post, and it stripped all the flesh off of his thumb. It was hanging there by a tiny little thread, and he was so angry at himself that he ripped that piece of flesh off and threw it in the brush, got back in the car, drove himself to the emergency room in Dilley, Texas, 16 miles away. And when he got there, they said, this is great, we can reattach that. Where is it? And he said, I threw it in the brush. They drove back with the nurses and everybody, and they looked for hours for the thumb, and they never found that piece of flesh, something probably eaten it. So they take him back to the emergency room, and they said, look, you have two choices. You're going to have a skin graft for that, and we can sew your thumb to your stomach and leave it there for 6 weeks. That's the best way to do it. Or we can just cut a piece of skin graft from your butt and just suture it on, and it won't ever be as good, but the advantage is your thumb won't be sewn to your stomach for 6 weeks. And he said, I'll take option 2, just do the skin graft from my butt. And they did that. It was very successful. It worked fine. And but the funniest thing about this story is that I have incredibly vivid memories, and we all do, of him. And definitely his mornings were completely ritualized. He would wake up, eat breakfast cereal, read the newspaper, and shave with an electric razor for a really long time. Like, he would shave with that electric razor for like 15 minutes, and while he's eating his cereal. And when he was done shaving his face with that razor, then he would take 2 quick passes over his thumb, because his thumb grew butt hair. Which, by the way, did not bother him at all.
No. He was completely unfazed by it.
Unfazed.
So, thumb, butt hair aside, the value of resourcefulness, right, and self-reliance. How do you apply that to the work that you do on a daily basis? How do you?
Well, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs and people pursuing dreams and passions in this kind. You always the whole point of moving things forward is you run into problems, you run into failures, things don't work, you have to back up and try again. Each one of those times when you have a setback and you back up and you try again, you're using resourcefulness, you're using self-reliance, you're trying to invent your way out of a box. And we have tons of examples at Amazon where we've had to do this. We've failed so many times. I always think of us as a great place to fail because we're good at it. We have so much practice. And just to give you one example, many years ago now, we wanted a third-party selling business because we knew we could add selection to the store that way. And we started Amazon auctions. Nobody came. I think maybe our mother was the only one who purchased something on Amazon auctions.
I bought a coffee cup.
You bought a coffee cup?
I did.
Okay, so there were 2 purchasers. And then we said, well, what can we do? We opened this thing called Z Shops, which was like fixed price auctions. Again, nobody came.
I didn't use that.
And then finally, each one of these failures is like a year and a half long. And so we're trying to invent new things. And we finally came across this idea of putting the third-party selection on the same detail pages, the same product detail pages that we had our own inventory on, our own retail inventory on. We called this marketplace, and it started working right away. And so that resourcefulness of trying new things, figuring things out, what the customers really want, it pays off in everything. And it pays off even in your daily lives. How do you help your children? What's the right thing? My wife has a great saying. We let our kids use, even now they're 17 through 12, but even when they were 4, we would let them use sharp knives, and by the time they were, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, we would let them use certain power tools. And my wife, much to her credit, she has this great saying. She said, I would much rather have a kid with 9 fingers than a resourceless kid. And which I just think is a fantastic attitude about life.
Luckily, you have resourceful kids with 10 fingers each.
Yeah, so far they have all their fingers.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that resourcefulness is so important. You actually it was a prerequisite for the selection of a spouse, right? So this is in my 20s. This is way pre-Tinder, pre-Match.com, and so I had this. At a certain point, I decided I wanted to get married, and I had all my friends setting me up, and I had my list of criteria. And this was like good old-fashioned blind dates. I went on dozens of blind dates, and it turned out I kept meeting people who were professional blind daters, and I sort of became a professional blind dater. And so we would sit down, and most of the conversation was quickly about how, we're not right for each other, but how do you meet people? And it was actually turned into a very good. But when I was telling my friends my criteria, one of the ones that I would list was that I wanted a woman who could get me out of a third world prison. And my friends were like, what are your future plans? What? And I said, no, it's just a visualization for somebody really resourceful, because I think that you don't want to go through life with teammates who aren't resourceful. And so you do want to go through life with people who, if you need, could get you out of a third world prison. Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically speaking.
Yeah. So, so this is a picture
that's a recent photo.
Yeah, that was last summer, I think.
Yeah.
We were on a family vacation, and so this one jumped out at me because you're doing McKinsey curls there with your wife, and you're looking a little buff, and so that, of course, made me think of this. Oh. Now, as internet memes go, Swole Jeff is pretty cool, right? So, if Swole Mark raced across the internet, I'd be pretty psyched. But, this got sent to me by so many people, variations of this, right? Oh my God, your brother looks awesome, your brother looks awesome. Yeah, I know. And then, but it confused me because, in all honesty, this is what I grew up with.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, right? So, when you guys saw Swole Jeff, I was like, I was surprised too, right? I mean, this is...
Yeah, sexy, right? I remember that. I am...
How old are you here?
That's a Halloween costume. I had some friends and we went as the fruit of the loom.
No, hold, wait. There you go.
There we go. That is... Yeah, the chicks,
they went as lady killers.
Chicks loved that. They loved that. We were very successful in high school.
So as fitness goes, and then there was this guy who's like late '90s Jeff, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And your eating habits at this point in your life were not great.
No, this is you won't even believe this story. You're just going to have to believe me that I tell you this is true. When my wife and I got married, I had been eating a whole can for a couple of years. I had been eating for breakfast every morning a whole can of Pillsbury biscuits. So I would wake up in the morning, I would preheat the oven to 375, I would get out the baking sheet, I would crack open the Pillsbury biscuits, place them on there, and with butter. And I would eat the whole can. And I was skinny as a rail, and it was just, after watching me, so then we get married, and she watched me do this every morning as my spouse for like 3 months. And then she finally stopped me one day, and she said, "Do you know what's in that?" And I was like, honestly, that wasn't even a concept for me, that there was something in food. That there was like I had never read a nutrition label in my life. I ate what tasted good to me. And so she kind of showed me the ingredients label, and we had a little very rudimentary discussion about nutrition, and I stopped eating the biscuits.
Well, I'm frankly very happy and somewhat surprised that you survived all of that. We're glad you're still with us.
So she was incredulous. She couldn't believe it.
So one of the things I want to talk about, a question that we've talked about before, you were 30 years old in 1994 when you decided to start Amazon.com. Mm-hmm. You had a great job. I remember you had a great apartment on the Upper West Side.
I'd been married for a year.
You'd been married for a year.
I had not been eating biscuits for 9 months.
And I'm just, how did you go through making the decision to drop what was a very good job and take this chance? It all seems very obvious now, right? This many years later that it paid off, but at the time it was not obvious.
No, it wasn't. And I did do a lot of soul searching. I went to my boss at the time, and I really liked my job. And I told my boss I was going to go do this thing, start an internet bookstore. And my wife I'd already told my wife, and she's like, "Great, let's go." And I said to my boss, I was going to do this. He's like, "This is a good idea." He said, "I think this is a good idea, but it would be an even better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job." And that sort of made some logical sense to me, and he convinced me to think about it for a couple of days. So I went away. I was really trying to get my head around how to think about this. And I think, for me, the right way to make that kind of very personal decision, because those decisions are personal. They're not like data-driven business decisions. They are, what does your heart say? And for me, the best way to think about it was to project myself forward to age 80 and say, look, when I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have. I don't want to be 80 years old in a quiet moment of reflection thinking back over my life and cataloging a bunch of major regrets. And I think that regrets, our biggest regrets, in most cases, you can murder somebody, okay, you'd regret that. But in most cases, our biggest regrets turn out to be acts of omission. It's paths not taken, and they haunt us. We wonder, what would have happened? I loved that person, and I never told him. And then they married somebody else. I didn't do this. And so that's the frame of mind that I put myself in. And once I did that, once I thought about it that way, it was immediately obvious to me. I knew that when I'm 80, I would never regret trying this thing that I was super excited about and failing. If it failed, fine. I would be very proud of the fact when I'm 80 that I tried. And I also knew that it would always haunt me if I didn't try. And so that would be a regret. It would be a 100% chance of a regret if I didn't try, and basically a 0% chance of regret if I tried and failed. So I think that's a useful metric for any important life decision.
And this is our sister took this photo. And she was, I didn't quite know why she thought this was a momentous occasion. This is you at McKinsey.
Yeah, we're about to take off driving across the country to start Amazon, go to Seattle.
And that's
my yellow lab, Kamala, named after a Star Trek character.
We're so happy to have these family photos, but we can't for the life of us figure out why Christina bothered to take them, but we're so glad she did. And then, she also was smart enough to tell you to leave the dog.
Yeah, she saved us probably because we were going to drive across the country with the dog, which was probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So she said, why don't I keep the dog? And after you guys get settled, I'll send you the dog.
So a question I have is, we just talked about the fact that, there was certainly no guarantee that Amazon was going to work.
No, there never is any kind of startup.
I think, and what would Jeff Bezos be doing if this hadn't worked out?
I think I don't. It's a good question. Nobody ever really knows what twists and turns life takes. My best guess is I would be a very happy software engineer.
Yeah. And working on anything in particular?
Well, today I might be. I don't know. I'm very, very curious about machine learning and artificial intelligence, and at Amazon we're doing a lot of that. Probably I would be attracted to that field today.
And if I thought of this question. I'm not sure exactly how you would answer it, but I am curious to know, like, your fantasy job, not the one that would pay the bills.
Well, that I have, and you know what it is.
I think
he knows.
My guess is bartender.
Yeah, I do have. By the way, I'm really glad I'm wearing my Honey Badger Don't Care T-shirt there. Thank you for that photo because it looks like I've had about 4 of those already. I appreciate that.
And that looks like a Bloody Mary. That's an early start.
What are brothers for?
That's an early start.
But yeah, I have this.
You make a mean cocktail.
I do. I pride myself on my craft cocktails, and I do have this fantasy that I want to be a bartender. And I know that it is a fantasy. Like, if I were actually a bartender, they're probably like, I've glamorized the job in my mind. I know that. But I love people. I like talking to people. I love making cocktails.
You're not very fast.
I'm super slow. It would have to be a craft cocktail bar. We'd have to charge a lot per drink, and there'd be a big sign behind the bar that says you can have it good or you can have it fast. Which do you want? That kind of thing. But yeah, I have a kind of fantasy there.
So if we could shift gears a little bit, I want to talk about Blue Origin.
Yeah.
So Blue Origin is your private spaceflight, commercial spaceflight company. And we'll talk in a minute about all the work that you're doing in that regard. But I guess what I want to focus on for a minute or two is the inspiration for that, the passion behind it. So, I'm going to put up a photo now, and this one's really more embarrassing for me than for you. But so here we are.
You look like you're about to block a soccer kick or something.
I'm auditioning for Alvin.
And that's on the far right there is our dad.
That's Chico and the Man over there on the right.
He's Cuban, and it's a kind of, it's one of those tricks that the universe plays on you that my mom's name is Jackie and my name is Jeff, and there's no J in Spanish. And so he still has to call her Yaki and me Yef. And but he sounds exactly like Ricky Ricardo, and is a delightful guy. But yeah, that's the whole crew there.
That's the whole crew there. So you were the valedictorian of your high school in Miami, and had the opportunity to give a speech
Yep.
at your graduation. And I think the vast majority of your speech was about colonizing space.
I think all of it.
I think all of it as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I still remember your closing line. I mean, even then, it stood out to me.
Yeah.
And it was, do you remember it?
I do. I remember the close. It was something like Space, the Final Frontier, Meet Me There.
That was it.
That was, yeah.
So,
And I've been passionate about space, rockets, and rocket engines since I was a 5-year-old boy.
and so, I want to talk about that a little bit because, we've talked about, or, certainly the story you've told about having seen the moon landing in 1969, right? So this is Pop again.
That's Christina, right?
That's our sister on the floor. So this was a very familiar setting for us. Anytime Pop was watching TV, he was laying on the. He had perfectly good furniture. I could see it, but
he liked to lay on the floor.
Laid on the floor to watch television.
Yeah.
And you remember a scene exactly like this when you were watching the lunar landing.
Yeah. No, yeah, that was his posture. Yeah, and I do think you never know exactly. You don't choose your passions choose you. How they are formed, you're never completely sure. But I do think you get imprinted somehow early on with certain things. And you just get excited about them, and because you're excited, you pay more attention, and they grow. And that's space is like that for me. I watched Neil Armstrong step onto the moon when I was 5.
And I do wonder. I know that Pop was a big fan of the Watergate trials. Also watched those in the
I
same
watched
setting.
Him just like this. He was kind of a news junkie anyway, but he obsessively watched the Watergate hearings.
Do you think at some level that might have influenced you?
At least by the Post.
Yeah,
I'm
just curious.
It's hard to know. I bought the Post because I think it's an important institution, and I told the team at the time, the Post at the time was kind of financially upside down, had a lot of work to do, no fault of their own. The internet had really taken the wind out of newspaper companies. And I said, look, I would not buy a financially upside down salty snack food company. But Post is a real institution I think matters and needs some runway. So that's why I did it. I happen to know the guy who had owned it for so many years, Don Graham, who's just an amazing person. And so that all worked out. But did watching the Watergate hearings with Pop on the carpet have influence on that? Probably.
Right, at some level. So going back to Blue Origin, I mean, space has been such a big part of your life for so long, and certainly every memory.
That's in Houston. We lived in Houston.
That
for
was a
many
park
years.
not too far from our house. I think that it's science fiction movies, books. My passion for that stuff certainly came from watching you enjoy it so much. But I look at this picture and I thought to myself, well, I've seen that face recently, and this. So this is you're standing on the landing pad.
Yeah.
In West Texas, the launch and landing site in West Texas, where you're launching and landing the New Shepard vehicle for Blue Origin. So, if you could just take a minute or two and sort of help us understand what is Blue Origin up to.
Well, Blue Origin the vision for Blue Origin is millions of people living and working in space, and the key thing is we have to dramatically reduce the cost of access to space. Right now, space travel is very expensive. And the reason it's expensive is not hard to understand. It's because we throw the hardware away after each use. And so we need reusable rocket vehicles, and that's what Blue Origin is doing. We're working on making sure that we don't have to throw the plane away every time after you fly off to your vacation destination. That would definitely increase the cost of your vacation. And so that's what we need to do, and we can do it. It's totally possible, and I think it's important.
Yeah, this is what the booster looks like when it's coming back down.
Yeah.
And this is again coming back.
My
down
cowboy hat still has champagne stains.
That's right. Your hat still has
the best
champagne.
kind of stains.
So, I guess, if we could talk, and this is one of my favorite shots. This is the booster in
And that's West Texas. It's a beautiful country.
So, if you could just talk a little bit about, you know, you've been passionate about space your whole life,
Yep.
but, this is not just a plaything for you.
No,
the
God,
work
no.
that Blue Origin is doing is not, a
No.
nice thing. I mean,
No.
this is important work.
My view is is that it's incredibly important work that needs to be done and done as quickly as possible. And I have my own reasons why I believe that. They can be explained pretty simply. And it's not, for me, it's not the, there's a very kind of common argument that's been around for a long time, actually kind of first popularized by Arthur C. Clarke, who said all civilizations become spacefaring or extinct. And this is the kind of Plan B argument that, when Earth is destroyed somehow, we better make sure that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. And I hate the Plan B argument. I think, Plan B with respect to Earth being destroyed is make sure Plan A works. So we have sent robotic probes to every planet in this solar system. Believe me, this is the best one. We know that. It's not even close. My friends who say they want to move to Mars or something, I say, why don't you go live in Antarctica for a year first? Because it's a garden paradise compared to Mars. And so this planet is so amazing. It's a jewel in our solar system. And we have, if you take baseline energy usage on Earth and just compound it at a few percent a year for just a few hundred years, you have to cover the entire Earth's surface in solar cells. So that's not going to happen. So we have two choices. We either go out into space or we switch over to a civilization of stasis. And personally, I do not like the idea of stasis. We have, our grandchildren and their grandchildren will live in a much better world if they can continue to advance and develop and use more energy and all of the things that we've enjoyed for hundreds of years as a civilization of growth. I don't even really believe in stasis. I think things are either growing or shrinking. I think stasis is highly unusual and real life doesn't exist. I don't even think liberty is consistent with the idea of stasis. I mean, if you get real stasis, somebody's going to have to tell you how many kids you can have, how much energy you can use. There'll be all kinds of things that just aren't consistent with liberty and freedom. So, but in space, we have, for all practical purposes, unlimited resources. We can have 1 trillion humans in the solar system and still wouldn't be crowded. And so then if you had 1 trillion humans, you'd have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts and 1,000 Da Vincis. And how cool would that be? But we have to go to space, and we have to go to space to save Earth. That's why this work is so important, and we don't have forever to do it. We've now gotten so big as a civilization on Earth that we kind of have to hurry. And so I believe that that really in a kind of a long time frame, the most important work I'm doing is Blue Origin and pushing forward to get humanity established in the solar system.
So, and what sort of time frame are we talking about?
Well, the grand vision, 1 trillion humans in the solar system and so on. That's hundreds of years. But we can have in just a couple of decades. I think we can have much lower cost space travel, and then we can start to, have really a dynamic entrepreneurial explosion in space. You can't really have much entrepreneurial activity in space today because just the basic price of admission is too expensive. I mean, just to do anything, even something relatively small in space, is still very, very expensive. We need to lower the cost of admission so that thousands of entrepreneurs can have companies in space, kind of like what we've seen on the internet. Right now, you can't be 2 kids in a dorm room can make Facebook, but they can't make a space company. It's not practical. I want to make that practical.
Gotcha. So, that leads me to think about some of the conversations we've had. This is another view of those mountains in West Texas. sitting around that fire pit. And some of the most profound conversations, for me anyway, that we've had are around the topic of long-term thinking.
Yeah.
Which is something that you've really embraced, and you've brought to the businesses that you run.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about. I don't think that most people who are running businesses or who are even starting a company like Blue Origin allow themselves to think in centuries, even for visions, for a vision of what they're creating, or at Amazon. I know that you've said 5 to 7 year timeframes for experiments that you're running. Talk to me about long-term thinking and your point of view on.
Well, long-term thinking is a lever. It lets you do things that you could not do or couldn't even conceive of doing if you were thinking short-term. So if that's why, I have a project where I'm helping a group of people build a 10,000-year clock. It kind of ticks once a year and dongs once a century, and the cuckoo comes out once a millennium. It's a big 500-foot tall thing inside a mountain right here.
Inside one of those mountains.
This mountain range. And the 10,000-year clock is a symbol. I don't think it'll do anything for the first few hundred years, but after a few hundred years, once it's old, people start to pay attention to older symbols. And so a few hundred years from now, I hope that people will think about that as a symbol for long-term thinking. If I collaborated with somebody here in this audience and I said, look, I want you to solve world hunger, and I want you to do it in 5 years, you would properly reject the opportunity. You would say, look, it's not possible, it's not practical. But if I said, look, I want you to solve world hunger in 100 years, that's a job you'd take, because it's a much more addressable problem. You can first create the conditions. You have time to create the conditions where then you can solve the problem. And so that's a very important way of thinking. And I find, and it works with everything. I mean, you have to back up and find the right time horizon for what you're trying to do. But at Amazon, we probably do most of our things. We expect to get some results in sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But we find a lot of our, other companies that compete against us in various ways, they're often trying to get things done in, 2 or 3 years. And so we can do things that, if everything has to work in 2 to 3 years, then that limits what you can do. If you give yourself the breathing room to say, okay, I'm okay if it takes 7 years, all of a sudden you have way more opportunities.
One of the things I want to shift to here is when we are raising a glass around the fire, and you usually have a toast.
A standard toast.
A standard toast that you usually kick off the night with.
Yeah.
And it's
to adventure and fellowship.
To adventure and fellowship. And literally that's like the toast that he kicks off just about every dinner with, right? Every dinner, every night. And it's interesting to me because I know that you are somebody who pays attention to the words that you use, right? You're careful about the words that you use. And those seem like very specific words. So I was wondering if we could just talk a little bit about why adventure and why fellowship. And as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me that you've been taking some adventures, throughout your whole life. Here you are.
That's our grandmother, Nanny.
Yeah, that's Nanny. And when you were a kid, you used to take road trips with Nanny and
We
Pop.
did the Wally Byram Caravan Club road trips. 300 Airstream trailers.
Here.
All driving down the highway together. Then we'd park.
This was before they were hipster cool.
Big wagon wheel formations. Yeah, there was no avocado toast at this time.
You and I had the fun opportunity. We drove across the country. Not too long ago.
In the Defender. That was an amazing trip.
That was a very fun trip. And then we also. We spent 3 days on horseback.
That was a 50-mile ride in West Texas. Yeah. 3 days. Super fun. My butt hurt.
Yeah. I apologize about the quality. Like I said, this is not what I do, so this is the best I can do here. But I did take this picture. That's Jeff sleeping on that trail ride.
It was cold. This is that ring of... You can see how I'm keeping that pillow from... This is when you know it's really good to be a mammal.
Provide your own heat.
Provide your own body heat. Keep the frost away from your face.
I guess all of these adventures. This is you're dropping down into a cave.
Yeah, that's me rappelling down. That was really fun.
You
were on that trip.
I was on that trip too. But so people have asked me this, because they know that we go on a lot of adventures together, and they're a bit incredulous when I answer the question. But they ask me, is he on his phone the whole time? Can he ever unplug? And they're incredulous when I say, honestly, he's not on his phone that much. He's just, we drove across the country, and it's not that you didn't do the work, but most of the time it was this.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing when you're, with your kids, and it's. How do you? I don't have a fraction of the responsibility that you do, and I find that I'm always wrestling with, my phone. I'm just curious, what sort of discipline or what sort of, how do you go about compartmentalizing the way that you do?
I do not. So when I have dinner, whether it's with friends or with my family, and I like to be talking to the people I'm with. I like to do whatever I'm doing. I don't like to multitask. It bothers me. If I'm reading my email, I want to be really reading my email. My mom tells a story about me being in Montessori school, and that they couldn't get me to switch tasks. So the Montessori school teacher would have to literally pick up my chair and just move me to the next task station. So I don't know. It's not like
it's not intentional.
I don't need discipline in order to not be checking my email. For me, it's very natural. I love being present in what I'm working, and I'm happy multitasking, but I do it serially. I will spend, and honestly, if something really important is happening, somebody will find me. It's not like I have to check my text messages every 5 minutes or something like that. That's not a big deal.
Right. And usually when they do find you, it's rarely to give you good news.
Oh yeah, no. If somebody comes and says you need to check your text messages right now, that's got to be bad news. But that's usually, actually, honestly, it's usually a family thing. It's like a medical thing or something. It's like, but it's not. I think that it's probably just a very personal decision. I think some people are very good at multitasking, and so they can do two things at once. And I'm at a restaurant with my wife or something, and we'll see a couple both texting, but every once in a while they show each other their phones, and it seems like they're having a very nice date. So I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
It's just not how I'm wired.
Got it. So going back to this sense of adventure, can you talk to me a little bit about what the role that adventure plays in your life? And what is it that it brings to you? It's more than just a distraction.
Yeah, no. So that when I say to adventure and fellowship, for me, adventure is you can choose. We all get to choose our life stories, and it's the choices that define us, not our gifts. Everybody in this room has many gifts. I have many gifts. You can never be proud of your gifts because they're gifts. They were given to you. You might be, tall, or you might be really good at math, or you might be extremely beautiful or handsome, or there are many gifts. And you can only be proud really of your choices, because those are the things that you are acting on. And one of the most important choices that each of us has, and you know this just as well as I do, is you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. And when you're 80, which one of those things do you think you're going to be more proud of? You're going to be more proud of having chosen a life of service and adventure. You see this in your firefighting work and everything else you do, Robin Hood, so on and so on. And I feel that is, for me, adventure is a shorthand way of thinking about that.
Got it. And I think that one of the other things that we've talked about when we talk about adventure is, exposing yourself to new things, right? And maintaining that childlike sense of wonder.
Totally.
And, I know that, this is important to you, certainly in our personal lives, which is why we do all of these fun things, but it also plays an important role in, how you approach the businesses that you're involved in.
So if you want to be an inventor of any kind, inventing a new service offering for customers or a new product or anything, being an inventor requires, because the world is so complicated, you have to be a domain expert. I mean, in a way, even if you're not at the beginning, you have to learn enough so that you become a domain expert. But the danger is once you've become a domain expert, you can be trapped by that knowledge. And so inventors have this paradoxical ability to have that, 10,000 hours of practice and be a real domain expert and have that beginner's mind. Have that look at it freshly, even though they know so much about the domain. And that's the key to inventing. You have to have both. And I think that is intentional. I think all of us have that inside of us, and we could all do it, but you have to be intentional about it. You have to say, yeah, I am going to become an expert, and I'm going to keep my beginner's mind.
And I know that, this is so important. You're always, it's a regular refrain, even at Amazon, this far into it, that it's still day one.
Day one.
So I guess the other half of that toast is, to fellowship.
Yeah.
Right? To adventure and fellowship. And again, fellowship is a very specific word, right? Friendship is much more common. So what is it about fellowship?
For me, the word fellowship conjures a vision of traveling down the road together. It has more journey in it than friendship. Friendship is great and would be great too, but fellowship captures friendship and traveling that path together.
This is down at the bottom of that
there we
cave.
are. Yeah.
There's our brother.
friends.
There's Mackenzie, our brother-in-law Steve.
Yeah.
Friend Danny.
That was a great trip.
That was quite the.
You don't have
adventure.
to worry about checking your phone there.
No, definitely not.
No radio signals down there.
But, another adventure, I guess, an opportunity for adventure and fellowship.
That was a fun trip.
Was this trip, and we were out at sea for 30 days.
Yeah.
And we did this. When you've been out at sea for 30 days, this looks like it's in focus. But why don't you, can you talk a little bit about what we were?
Excuse me.
And by the way, my beard game is very strong.
Oh, you're crushing me on the beard game. I don't even try. My beard thing doesn't work at all. Look at that crap beard. But this is the recovery expedition. We went and recovered the Apollo 11, Saturn V F1 engines from the bottom of the Atlantic under 14,000 feet of water. They'd been resting there peacefully for more than 4 decades, and we did it. It was an incredible adventure. The captain, there were 60 people on the boat, including our mother, Jackie, and she was the only woman on the boat. So it was 59 men and my mom. And when I first got on the boat, the captain came and found me. And this is a big 300-foot boat with a moon pool and diving submersibles, remotely operated vehicles, very high tech. The captain came, a very nice Norwegian guy, and he said, we've never had a woman on the boat before, and I've taken the liberty of removing all of the pornography from the common areas, and I just wanted to make sure that's okay with you. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. That's fine. That's good.
I never did find that stash. And so we were successful. We recovered those engines, and where are they?
One of them is at the Smithsonian, and one of them is at the Seattle Museum of Flight.
Well, hopefully there'll be some other 5-year-old who runs into them and is inspired as you were.
Yeah, they're incredible engineered objects. I mean, still today, there's probably no rocket engine that has been more successful than the Saturn V F1.
So, one of the, as I was putting this together and looking at all of these pictures and, thinking about the adventures that we've had together, and, knowing how much time and effort you put into Amazon and the Washington Post and Blue Origin, I also happen to know that you're a devoted husband and beloved father with your kids. You have a fantastic relationship.
The Bezoses have a lot of kids. He has 4, I have 4, sister has 3. Yeah. We're making sure that the population doesn't go down.
We need to go into space.
Yeah.
Well, one of the questions I have is, how do you go about establishing that work-life balance that everybody, talks about and thinks about? You live a big life, right? And how do you
I get this question a lot. I get it. I teach senior executive kind of leadership classes at Amazon for our most senior execs, and I also teach, or not teach, but I also speak to interns, so kind of all across the spectrum. And I get this question about work-life balance all the time from both ends of the spectrum. And my view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. I think it's misleading. I like the phrase work-life harmony, because I know that if I am energized at work, happy at work, feeling like I'm adding value, part of a team, whatever energizes you, that makes me better at home. It makes me a better husband, a better father, and likewise, if I'm happy at home, it makes me a better employee, a better boss, all the things. It's not primarily about, there may be crunch periods where it's about the number of hours in the week, but that's not the real thing. Usually it's about, do you have energy? And is your work depriving you of energy, or is your work generating energy for you? And there are people, everybody in this room knows people who fall into these two camps. You're in a meeting and the person comes in the room. Some people come into the meeting and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come into the meeting and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people they drain energy from the meeting. And you have to decide which of those kinds of people you're going to be. Are you going to add energy?
And the same thing at home.
And the same thing at home. And it's a wheel, it's a cycle, it's a flywheel, it's a circle. It's not a balance. Because a balance, that's why that metaphor is so dangerous, because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something, yeah, that maybe there are limits, and they probably. But I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy, and that's what I would recommend. That's what I do recommend to interns and execs.
So we're out of time. I just want to say that. First of all, thank you all for joining us around the proverbial fire pit. It's not lost on me that I'm incredibly. It brings me joy to have the opportunity to have conversations like this with you often, and I do cherish those opportunities. And this is just one more. So, thank you very much. Thank all of you. I guess there's just one more thing to say.
We should toast.
Yep. To adventure and
fellowship.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the last official session of this wonderful conference. And it's not an understatement to say that we have another very special guest. We have, of course, Mr. Jeff Bezos with us today, General Larry Spencer, former Vice Chief of Staff of the General Spencer, over to you, sir.
Thank you all for being here again, and especially appreciate you taking the time to come spend a little bit of time with us.
Thank you. Really glad.
So, I have a wife that spends a lot of money, and I live in the D.C. area, and I could be looking for a job soon. So, any announcements you want to make about your headquarters?
Thank you, Larry. We'll make a decision before the end of the year. That's all I can say on that topic. We're excited to make that decision.
Okay.
And I hope your wife is spending some of that money on Amazon.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. One of the reasons we're happy to have you is you are right in the wheelhouse of everything that's been going on here the last few days, especially as you talk about innovation. And I think if anyone epitomizes innovation, it's you in your company. So a lot of questions that have come up the last few days is, how do you encourage employees to be innovative? We've talked a lot here about the frozen middle, how folks will have ideas and they can't get them through. A lot of folks will worry about the risk, what's going to happen if I make a mistake. How do you encourage your employees to be innovative?
Well, this is a fantastic and important question.
To be innovative, you have to experiment. If you want to have more invention, you need to do more experiments per week, per month, per year, per decade. It's that simple. You cannot invent without experimenting. And here's the other thing about experiments. Lots of them fail. If you know it's going to work in advance, it is not an experiment. And what happens in big organizations, Amazon's a big organization now too, the Air Force is a big organization, is that we start to confuse experimentation with operational excellence. So operational excellence is one of our 4 key principles at Amazon. We're building a fulfillment center. We've built over 150 large fulfillment centers around the world now. We know how to do that. That is not an experiment. If we build the 151st fulfillment center and screw it up, that's just a failure. That's not the kind of failure we're seeking. We want failures where we're trying to do something new, untested, never proven. That's a real experiment, and they come in all scale sizes. So you need to teach people that those 2 kinds of failure are different. And you need to have, you said something about that hard middle where ideas don't go up. I think this is such an important thing. At Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea. And then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. And then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we get, you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes. You want a system where, as a junior Air Force officer with a good idea, the first 5 people tell me no, and somehow I can still go pursue that idea. So you got to figure out, that's an organizational challenge that big organizations have to figure out a way to do. And by the way, I get, this happens all the time. I'll say, I don't think that's a good idea, but somebody else will greenlight it. And I'm fine with that because usually the cost of the experiments is pretty small. Things only get expensive when they work, right? Once something works, you're like, whoa, we need to double down on that. Now, then the spending can get heavy, and then those become big consequential decisions, and that's where the hierarchy and using the judgment of the most senior people to make this really helps.
Sure.
You also have to select people who like to invent. So that's the other, when you're in your hiring and in your promotions process, you need to say, is this person like to be innovative? Do they have a bit of a pioneering spirit? Maybe they're also a little bit annoying because they might be, a little bit radical or a bit of a rebel. They're not always the easiest people to get along with, but you want them in your organization. And you be mavericks.
Let me follow up on that.
They're a spice.
Sure.
I wouldn't recommend having 90% mavericks.
Exactly. And let me follow up on that because what I found, at least in my military career, is that oftentimes mavericks, as you mentioned, are not welcomed.
Yes.
And one of the phrases I really didn't like when I came up, as I was in the Air Force, was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
Well, that doesn't mean you shouldn't make it better.
Yeah, by the way, your adversaries may be making it better.
Exactly. So how do you handle these mavericks? That, how do you protect them from the institution destroying them?
Well, I think that has to be culture. You have to teach the value that these people bring, but also I would push hard on the mavericks to say you also have to be organized. you can't just be a crazy person. You know, so it's like, it's fine to be a maverick, but, you know, write your ideas down,
Sure.
sell your ideas, persuade, create the conditions where the ideas can blossom. You can't get anything done if you're not, if you're just purely a creative person with zero organizational skills, you're probably not going to get much done.
Sure.
So I would push back on the organization and say, look, these people have an important role to play. And by the way, all of us are a little bit maverick. So this is not, it's not like there are these people that were born mavericks. I don't think so. We all have this inside of us. If you look at kids, they're all inventive. They're all doing crazy things. They literally, I actually saw one time one of my kids put a square peg in a round hole. And as he was doing it, I was thinking, that's never going to work. And then it fit. And I was like, gosh, that's amazing. And so little kids try things, and we all do that when we're little, and some of us lose it. You need to have, one of the great paradoxes of inventing at a high level is that you need to be an expert in your domain area, and you need to have a beginner's mind. You absolutely need both of those things. The world is too complex to actually just be a beginner. So, you know, I can't, no matter how inventive I am, I can't go invent a new kind of brain surgery. You have to be a neurosurgeon. You have to already know all there is to know about brain surgery and then take it to the next level. The problem is, for many people, by the time they become true experts, they've lost that ability to see things in a fresh way. They've lost the beginner's mind. And so that's another thing. You always need to be stepping back and saying, if I'm an expert in launch vehicles or whatever it is, I need to step back and say, okay, if I were looking at this for the first time, what would I be seeing and noticing? These are just some of the things you need to do to be innovative.
Sure. For roughly 80% of my career in the Air Force, we would launch satellites and not think twice about it. Space was considered a sanctuary. Obviously, that changed. So what do you see as the biggest challenges or risk in operating in the space domain?
Well, let's start with the fundamental principle. You never want a fair fight. That's for a boxing ring. Outside of a boxing ring, a fair fight is just bad strategy. And it means you didn't prepare properly. And as you pointed out, this nation has enjoyed incredible space dominance for so long. And it's changing because some of our potential adversaries are getting very sophisticated. And so for me, or if I were in your shoes, the way I would think about this is, in this new era, how are we going to maintain space dominance? What does it really mean? And you're going to need some fundamental capabilities. You have to be able to go to space more frequently with less lead time. If you said, Larry, if you said, Jeff, I have a mission for you. I need you to control this piece of terrain over here. But there are some constraints. I need you to control that piece of terrain, but you can only visit it once a month with a lead time of 2 years. I've just been given an impossible mission. And by the way, when you translate that to space, I'm being very generous with the once a month and the 2-year lead time. The reality is worse than that. So it's not surprising that it's difficult to do that. And it's one of Blue Origin's missions is to make access to space more frequent, ready to go on a moment's notice, lower cost, which requires reusability. All those things are going to be required, in my view, to move into a new era of U.S. space dominance. And believe me, I don't have to tell you guys, you do not want to see that era end. That's a big deal.
Sure. Now, we have a lot of industry partners here in the audience. In fact, the largest number of industry partners we've had attend an AFA session. So what are some of the benefits for your companies partnering with commercial industry?
You have got to, this is a really important general point. is so important for the DoD, for the Air Force, for every government institution, when they can, to use commercial solutions. And what I find is that when the requirements get written, they're not written necessarily taking that into account in all cases. And so you get something, you end up getting a custom-built system which meets the requirements when a commercial system would have met those requirements, or actually met a different set of requirements, but in a much better way for the capability that's actually being required. And that's a big problem. It's very costly, it slows you down. You want to reserve your custom requirements for things where you really need special sauce, something where there really isn't and shouldn't be a commercial avenue. You know, on writing requirements, I tell our engineers at Blue Origin, good engineers build to requirements. Great engineers push back on requirements. And that's what you need to do. You need to say, is this requirement really needed? Because if we can waive this requirement, then we can use this commercial system. And if you look at, I'd give an example from my own world, which is Amazon Web Services. We're now seeing, fantastic growth from both companies and government institutions and the CIA and the DoD using our using our compute cloud instead of building their own systems. And the reason these companies are doing that instead of building their own data centers in these government institutions and DoD and so on is because the capabilities that they get, there are some reasons, but one of them is that the capabilities they get keep improving kind of auto-magically without any effort. And part of what's going on there is in a system like that, you want co-customers because the co-customers drive the product forward. If you're the only customer of a software system, you're the only one driving it forward. If thousands of customers share that system, then the other 999 that are not you are also driving it forward, and you get that as a tailwind. Is that the analogy I'll give you is that of a personal physician. The last thing you want, Larry, is a personal physician who only services you. Because that person, they'd be available, they'd show up and do house calls, they'd be there any time, but they wouldn't be, you want a doctor who's seeing hundreds of sick people so that when you have a problem, that doctor has a bunch of data points. How could a personal private physician ever diagnose something? It would be so challenging. You don't want a private doctor. You want a doctor where you want a bunch of co-patients because those patients are teaching that doctor every day. And that's what happens if you can use a commercial system, you effectively have a doctor who has lots of patients teaching.
Great. One of the great things about this session is I see a lot of folks taking notes. And so let's get specific with the Air Force. How would you recommend fostering innovation specifically with an organization like the Air Force and with Velocity?
Oh, okay. I could talk about this a long time. I'm going to give you the short version of this. Velocity is so important. And in large organizations, it is about decision making. And one of the problems, let me back up just one more piece. What you really want is scale and nimbleness, right? So if you take the US Air Force, one way to make it nimbler would be to make it much smaller. But that's a really bad solution because the scale brings so many advantages. And I see the same thing at Amazon. Amazon, because of our scale, we can do things that we just couldn't ever have done as a garage startup. There's some things that only big organizations can do. I love garage startups. I was a garage startup, but you can't build a Boeing 787 in your garage. You need a big organization like Boeing to do that. So we want scale. We love scale, and you would never trade the scale of the U.S. Air Force for anything. But the question becomes, how do I keep the advantages of scale but still have the advantages of a nimble startup? How do I get the nimbleness too? I want to be able to absorb a punch because of my scale, and I want to be able to dodge a punch because of my nimbleness. Well, the way you stay nimble is by making decisions fast. In a 20-person startup company, the decision-making speed is so quick. And that's why they're so nimble. And then in a big company or a big organization like the Air Force, that decision-making has a tendency to speed, the decision-making. You get high-quality decisions. I think sometimes people think the decisions are low quality. I don't think so. I think you usually get high-quality decisions. You just get them slowly, which is a problem. And so the way to fix that in a large organization, this is what we do at Amazon, is we acknowledge that there are two types of decisions. There are decisions that are, we call them two-way doors. They are decisions where if you make a decision, you walk through the door, and it turns out you made the wrong decision, you turn around, come back. And the consequence of that misstep is small. That's a type 2 decision. That's a two-way door decision. There's a type 1 decision where it's really hard to reverse. When you walk through that door, you have walked through that door. And it's going to be expensive or impossible and time-consuming to reverse that decision. So you have to get that right. That's a high-consequence decision. Those decisions should be made deliberately, carefully, slowly. At Amazon, I find myself on those. I'm the chief slowdown officer. I slow those decisions down. I'm like, no, I want to see this one more way. And the teams working on it roll their eyes. I've already seen it 18 ways, but I thought of a 19th way, and I want to see it. That's correct for a high-consequence, irreversible decision. You owe it to your teammates to make those decisions. The problem comes in large organizations is that junior executives, or I'll switch it to officers, junior officers role model senior officers. So they're looking around and watching. And it turns out, rightly, senior officers are mostly making high-consequence, type 1 decisions that require a slow, deliberate decision-making process. And so then the junior officers are like, well, that must be how we should make all decisions. We'll make all decisions with that heavyweight process. And so now even trivial decisions end up going through a lot of extra unnecessary process to be made, when really many of those decisions should be made by very small teams or by even single individuals with good judgment, knowing full well that they can be reversed. And the senior leadership can set the tone on that. They can say, no, why this decision, why are so many people involved in this decision? I want Jill to make this decision. Whatever Jill decides is fine, and guess what, Jill? If you get it wrong, it's okay. We're just going to back up and do it again. I don't want you to talk to anybody about this. Just go make it.
So I've been here in the hotel since last Thursday. I decided to run home quickly last night to change out some clothes, and typical of my wife, I walked in the door after being gone for several days, and she asked me to take out the trash. Now,
she saved it for you.
She did, but I didn't want to take out the trash, so I was considering, okay, she asked me to take out the trash. Now, what's the risk of me not taking it out? So we're all. This is a group of innovators.
Over a beer, I want to hear how this ended up.
Okay. The Air Force was birthed on innovation, so you have a generally innovative crowd here. However, there is a balance between innovation and risk.
Yes.
How do you balance those two?
Well, here's what I would say is that the winners, when you're doing these experiments, winners pay for thousands of losers. So when you're talking about, to put it in Amazon terms, we've had a few gigantic winners at Amazon. We've had Amazon Prime, our membership program. Amazon Web Services has been a gigantic winner. Our marketplace business, where we let third-party sellers compete against us on our primary retail real estate. Those are huge winners for Amazon. Each of those winners has more than paid for thousands of experiments. And so when you're talking about the kinds of experiments that you would be doing here at the Air Force, that I do at Amazon and at Blue Origin, the positive outcome is very long-tailed. You can get, you can get just gigantic. It's an analogy in baseball. Everybody knows that if you swing for the fences, you're going to hit more home runs, but you're also going to strike out more. And in baseball, the most runs you can score when you're up at the plate is 4. Your upside is capped. It's not long-tailed. In business, and I bet it's true here at the Air Force as well, that upside isn't really capped. Every once in a while in business, you step up to the plate, you swing as hard as you can, and you get 1,000 runs. And so that long-tailed distribution of those possible outcomes is what makes experimenting worthwhile. And so when you're balancing the risk, you say the most I can lose is the cost of the experiment. And the value of the invention could be uncapped.
We obviously live in a very diverse world, a very diverse country, and a very diverse Air Force. What role does diversity play in innovation? Not just race, ethnicity, or gender, but also background.
I think all of those types of diversity play a role in invention and innovation. And what I have seen, the kind of invention that I do every day, and it's going to be very similar here, just because of the size of the organizations and the size of the things that you're trying to accomplish. This is team invention. It is not, by the time we end up, Echo is the Echo Alexa, speaker. That is an example of an invention that no customer asked for. If we had gone to customers, 6 years ago or 7 years ago, whenever it was that we put Echo on the drawing board, customers, and we said, look, would you buy a black cylinder that you plug into the wall in your kitchen, and you can ask it what time it is, set timers, ask it what the weather is, ask it to play music for you? They'd have been like, no, I will not buy that. And so we invented that, but there was no single person who invented it. It was team invention. And people come at these things because of their diverse backgrounds, which I think does include gender and race and everything else, but also certainly, did you come from a wealthy family? Did you come from a broken home? All these things lead people to think in slightly different ways. And so when you do that team invention, you want people in the room thinking very differently. You're going to end up with a more robust invention.
Our Chief and Secretary have talked a lot this week about talent management and growing leaders. When you recruit folks for your company and you mentor folks in your company, how are you recruiting and mentoring and raising the next Jeff Bezos?
Well, it depends on the seniority of the person you're talking about. I teach a senior leaders class at Amazon, which I enjoy, and there I teach a bunch of different things. But one of the things that really resonates with the folks that I teach there is stress management. And I offer to people that it's part of their job to make sure that they don't get burned out. And I point out to them, I'm a member of the Business Council, and I meet with lots of other kind of Fortune 500 CEOs from time to time, and I often hear them talking about how stressed they are, and there seems to be, I think, this idea that if the more senior you are, the more stress you should have. I think that's the opposite. Because the more senior you are, the more control you have over your environment. To a large degree, you get to pick who your senior staff is. To a large degree, you get to pick your schedule. To a large degree, not 100%, nothing's 100% in this world. To a large degree, you get to decide how you interact. Do you like to do lots of one-on-ones, or do you like to have small group meetings? You have, as a senior executive, you have a lot of control. And what I find is sometimes people forget that they have that control as a senior executive or as a senior officer. They forget that they can construct, to a certain degree, their work environment every day. So, one of the things I try to do is I try to preserve some time that's unscheduled, because I realized, this is several years ago, I realized that hard work never stresses me out, but being overscheduled does stress me out. And so I started working on, okay, what are the ways that I can be less scheduled? So I want to have a series of meetings that are just on standby, that I can do whenever I want. Most speaking engagements that I do, not this one, but most speaking engagements that I do, I say, I can't do it unless I can tell you the day before. And if I can tell you the day before, there's probably a 50% chance or better that I can do it, but I don't want to let you down by canceling. And if I put this poll in my schedule, I know by the time the date arrives, I'm going to regret it. By the way, the weird thing that happens when I do that is I find I'm really excited to say yes and to go do it. So it's because it's just, that's some kind of, human nature, that you don't want to be forced into things. You want to know that it's your choice. And so senior leaders have more choice. The other thing that I try to teach in that regard is I get asked by people at all age ranges, all levels of seniority, what do I think about work-life balance? And my view on work-life balance is that I prefer the phrase work-life harmony. To me, balance implies a strict trade-off. And I have seen situations where people they have all the time in the world. Maybe they're out of work. They have lots of time. They have all the time, and they're so stressed that they're actually terrible at home. Everybody at home is like, boy, I sure wish you'd get a job. My sister-in-law says, for better, for worse, but not for lunch. And so it's you really want harmony. You want if you're happy at work, if you're finding meaning in your work, if you are, it can be hard. They call it work for a reason. It's not going to be fun all the time. That's a pipe dream. None of us enjoys every minute of every day. And to have that kind of idea would just be naive. But there should be fun at work. You should be laughing. There should be moments of joy. And if you're getting energy from work, instead of your work draining your energy, then you're going to come home and you're going to be a better mother, a better father, a better wife, a better husband, all of those things. You're going to want to take out the trash. And so, even before being asked, that's what's going to happen, Larry. She's going to say, who is this guy? And so, you really need to, I think if you're starting to get to the point where you are worried about work-life balance, I would challenge you to think, is just something out of whack. It's probably not the hours. Look, if you're working 120 hours a week, you're also doing something wrong. That's too much. It's not sustainable. Maybe you can do that for a week or two, but that's it. But if you're working, 60 hours a week, that's completely sustainable for most people. And if you're burned out by it, it's not the number of hours. It's that you're doing something wrong. You need to figure out what it is, because you're going to take that home, and then your home life is going to be stressful, and then you're going to bring that back into the office. So it's going to be a negative spiral, and that spiral will also be a positive one as soon as you turn it around.
Okay, great. Now, I've only known you for a few minutes, but just talking to you in the green room, it's obvious that you like to have fun.
Yes.
So how do you create fun for your companies, the folks that work for you?
Larry saw me eat a hamburger in the green room in about 45 seconds. What do I do?
That was fun, by the way.
I'm sorry, I missed a question.
How do you create fun in your work environment?
Yeah, well, a couple things. First of all, I think that the work itself should be fun. So it's also great to layer on fun. I mean, you know, if I think about the people that I work with, we have dinners together, we have Super Bowl parties together, we have impromptu concerts together. You know, we do a lot of fun things. But the real thing is when you're in the meeting and you're going through the important topics of the day or of the year or of the decade, whatever you're working on, is that fun? And you know, there are these people, when they walk in the room, they bring energy. That person walks in the meeting and everybody gets a little lift. Those people are worth their weight in gold. And by the way, there is another kind of person who when they walk in the meeting, and you all know this, you feel it. As soon as they walk in the room, it's very deflating. Everybody is like, oh. And don't be that guy. Figure out how to be the first guy. The person who, when you enter the room, everybody is kind of excited. It's not that hard. Every meeting, you should start with some encouragement and end with some encouragement. You can tell people very candid truths in the middle of the meeting that they don't like and don't want to hear. But you can end it on an up note, and you can say, and you can also just say, look, we screwed this up, and we all know it. Even that can be fun.
Sure.
If you acknowledge it, we screwed this up, we all know it. Let's figure out how. Let's find the root cause. I believe in root causes. Finding root causes, fixing root causes, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Everything I have ever succeeded at in life is because of that philosophy.
Sure. There are a couple of things that are certain in life. We've all heard death and taxes. But there's a third one that I'm pretty confident about, and that is your bank account is quite a bit larger than mine. So with that in mind, so not much keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
I would like to have that problem actually, but I don't. But what keeps you up at night?
Well, I sleep extremely well. So just to put that out there, I am, even when I'm worrying over issues, it doesn't stop me from sleeping. I'm a gifted sleeper. But I know the way in which you mean the question. And at Amazon, because it is such a big company now, and it's grown so quickly. So I started the company in 1995. We opened our doors, so 23 years ago. I'm delivering all the packages to the post office myself. I don't know if you know anything about my personal background. You know, I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. My mother was pregnant with me in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And believe me, in 1964, it was not cool to be pregnant in high school. My grandfather went to bat for her to keep them. They tried to kick her out of high school, and my grandfather said that you can't do that. It's a public school. She gets to finish high school. And the principal finally capitulated, but he said his terms were that my mom could not do any extracurricular activities or have a locker. My grandfather, being a wise guy, was like, done, we'll take that deal. So she finished school. My dad is a Cuban immigrant, and like most immigrants anyway, he loves this country even more than those of us who were born here. And so I started this company, and I'm driving the packages to the post office myself. My big dream is that we will one day be able to afford a forklift. And I'm just trying. It was a tiny, tiny company. Today, it's almost 600,000 people. It's a very large company. And so the answer to your question, you know, metaphorically, what keeps me awake at night, I worry about somehow losing our way with respect to our culture. Our culture is four things: customer obsession instead of competitor obsession, willingness to think long-term, and longer investment horizons than most of our peers, eagerness to invent, which of course goes hand in hand with failure. You have to. And then finally, taking professional pride in operational excellence. The professional pride part is so important Because 90% of what all of you do, nobody ever sees. It's inside the work. People see something finished, but they don't see what's inside it. Only you see that while you're doing the work. And those things can't be great since nobody's seen them. Nobody's inspecting it. You're not going to get any credit for it. The only thing that's going to make you have high standards on that piece of the work that nobody's ever going to see is your own professional pride and operational excellence. Those are the 4 cultural attributes that are at Amazon. We use the same ones at Blue Origin. We use the same ones at AWS. Those things, if they start to erode at the edges, that would make me very nervous. So I spend a lot of time trying to inspect that, audit that, teach that. Teaching things like that is about repetition. Senior leaders need to be broken records on the things that are important to the organization. And if everybody in the organization, like you have succeeded when you start to see people roll their eyes because of your repetition on certain important things. Because senior leaders don't have to do a lot of things. They have to pick a few big ideas and enforce tough execution against those big ideas. And that requires a lot of repetition.
Unfortunately, our time is going by a lot faster than I thought. I could stay here all day, and I'm sure the audience could too. I think you have a couple of videos you want to show.
I do. I have like 2 or 3 minutes of videos if you want to see
and then
them.
I've got one last question after the video.
Okay, let's roll the, you can roll them in any order you want, and I'll just talk to them if I can see them. Go ahead, do the New Glenn one first. This is an animation of New Glenn. Okay, the New Glenn is our orbital vehicle. It's 3.85 million pounds of thrust. In terms of thrust, it's about half the size of Saturn V. This is the landing gear. There's 6 landing gears, so we have landing gear out capability. The booster is fully reusable and lands downrange on a ship. It's powered by 7 BE-4 engines. The BE-4s each have 550,000 pounds of thrust, and they're powered by liquefied natural gas and liquid oxygen. The strakes provide good cross range. It's the second stage. This has actually changed since this animation was made. We switched the second stage to liquid hydrogen using our BE-3U engine, which I'll show you a short clip of in a second. Now the booster is coming back in for a landing. We've really stressed availability on this vehicle, and so we have designed the landing ship to be underway so we can stabilize it really well, because we want to be able to land that booster even in heavy sea states. There's the landing. And then, of course, the most important part, payload deployment. So thank you. There's a big team of people working very hard to make all of that come true in the very near future. Next year, I will invest just over $1 billion in that program. If you play the, it doesn't matter what order, play the BE-3 video, I guess, or whatever. Whichever one you play, I'm going to talk about. All right, here's the BE-3. This is a very short video. BE-3U, this is a truncated nozzle version of the BE-3U. It's based on our BE-3 PM engine, which is our new Shepherd engine, which is for our suborbital tourism market. This is the BE-4. This is the 550,000-pound thrust engine. It's ox-rich stage combustion, liquefied natural gas, liquid oxygen. Test program's going very well. Team's doing a great job. Let's do the new Shepherd video real quick. This just happened. This is testing our escape system. We'll be putting people in space this coming year. This was our third kind of envelope test of the escape system. It's a solid rocket motor with 70,000 pounds of thrust that takes the crew capsule away from the booster. And this particular test was the high altitude. We were basically already in space just before main engine cutoff is when this would happen in real life. And it's one of the more stressing cases. Watching this
PM touchdown
landing never gets old for me. And then here comes the crew capsule big windows. And that's the terminal decelerator system kicking up dirt there. And now let's show the landing, the manufacturing facility and the launch pad in Cape Canaveral. This is a good picture. This is a 650,000 square foot launch. So that's a drone shot of it. It's up and operating now. As far as I know, we're one of the only launch companies actually building manufacturing right there on the Space Coast. You can go to the launch pad just to show that. Between these two facilities, this is our launch pad. We leased pad 36 at Canaveral. Between these two facilities, the manufacturing facility and pad 36, we've already invested about $1 billion in the Space Coast. So there you go.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
One of the reasons I like to talk about how much we've invested is I do want people, especially this audience, to know how committed we are to this. This isn't something that we're in.
Sure. The final question is, at the end of the day, in the Air Force, we're about leadership.
Yeah.
And most people will never get to be CEO of a major company. You're the CEO of multiple companies. So what 2 or 3 leadership principles, in your experience, have really helped you manage large organizations?
Well, there are a bunch of them. I mentioned one of them earlier, which I think is the most important thing. If you're really talking about the most senior leader has to know what the big ideas are for their organization. You know, I've talked about this, but I'll tell it. At Amazon, I know what the big ideas are. Low prices, fast delivery, and vast, huge selection. Those are the 3 big ideas. And those ideas are permanent in time. So because they're never going to change, we can put energy into them. And the energy we put in today is going to be paying dividends later. It's impossible to imagine 10 years from now, somebody in this room will come to me and say, Jeff, I love Amazon. I would just wish you charged slightly higher prices. Or, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. And same thing with Blue Origin. I know what customers want. These things the big ideas are so obvious. Lower cost, higher availability, more reliability. It needs to work every time. It needs to fly when you say you're going to fly, and it needs to be way cheaper. And then once you identify those big things, then you can build strategies around each of them. What's the strategy around low cost? It's reusability. And by the way, it has to be real reusability. You know, like the new Shepherd video that I showed you, that vehicle is designed for actual operational reusability. We don't take the thing apart and inspect it between flights. We fly it over and over. If you build a space vehicle that you have to inspect and in an intense way and disassemble and refurbish between flights, that's going to be more expensive than an expendable vehicle. It has to be real operational reusability. So what's the strategy for New Glenn on reliability? Well, one of them is one fault operative. Our entire architecture uses a one fault operative requirement. What about availability? There's a bunch of things. I showed you the landing ship being stabilized underway so that we don't have to worry about the sea states downrange. But there are others too. We have a requirement in New Glenn that launch shall not be delayed by any one sensor being out. So we have one sensor out should not affect availability. You can come up with it. So basically, once you identify the big ideas and you keep iterating on them and asking the team, what more can we do for availability? AWS has the same thing. Everybody who does cloud computing, what do they want? They want data security. Nobody's going to say, well, I wish my data was just a little less secure. You know, they also want availability. They don't want their service to be down. You know, these things. The great thing about the big ideas is you don't have to launch a research project to figure them out. You know what they are in your head already. That's how big they are. All you have to do is talk about them a lot and make sure that the whole organization is putting energy into them.
Great. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much we've appreciated you being here. We know how busy you are. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and spend with us here at the Air Force
If I could
Association.
just, if you do, could
Sure.
I say one? I'd just like to make one remark, which is, you know, you get in life you can have a job, you can have a career, or you can have a calling. And if you have a calling, you've really made it. And I believe most of the people in this room have really made it, because what you're doing has meaning, and that matters. And I just want to thank you for that. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you so
you.
much.
Jeff, General Spencer.